Okay, hello. Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to this edition, the last edition in 2025 of the Healing Arts Encounters in Arts and Medicine here at the Charité. My name is Lukas Feireis, and I have the pleasure of hosting a series on behalf of the International Society for Arts and Medicine. And of thinking together with you about what happens when artistic and medical ways of knowing share the same stage. Reflected, of course, in the usually equally transdisciplinary audience gathered here tonight. Out of curiosity to read the room, who has a medical background in the room now? That appears to be almost the majority who has an artistic background. So I would say in the room, we are, if we split it in these two fields only, in 2/3 in the medical and 1/3 in the artistic. Before I continue, actually, I would like to ask you, Vanessa, to the stage. It's Vanessa Weiss, coordinator of the Network for Art and Medicine here at the Charité, because for the students that are getting credit points for the series, they have to write a short reflection after each lecture, just what stayed with them, what inspired them, and we just pick a few out from the feedback, and you will read them to the audience, which creates a link to the last session, which is always kind of nice to connect to.
Yeah. So as a reminder, we had last week, 2 weeks ago, Lucy Strecker and Hans-Jörg Reinberger here. And before we begin with this session, I want to give 3 brief impressions of the students' reflections from the last time. So first, many appreciated the idea of the experiment as a shared space of uncertainty in both art and medicine, helping them to see clinical practice with more openness. Second, the concept of the pharmacon, so healing and harm intertwined, made them reflect on the ambivalence present in everyday care. And third, several noted that the session revealed the performative side of clinical work, where communication, atmosphere, and gestures shape the experience of healing itself. So overall, the students expressed how artistic perspectives help them understand medicine in a more human and in a more nuanced way. So let's see what comes out of today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So as you just said, over the past months, this semester, our conversations have moved to film and the clinical gaze. By the way, how's the sound? It's okay? Sound-wise? Good. Through experimental systems, that was the topic of the last time, and the in-between spaces where knowledge and also vulnerability emerge. And tonight we turn our attention to perhaps the most consequential in-between of all the developmental origins of health and disease, that long, complex arc from preconception through pregnancy in the first years of life, in which biology, history, environment, and inequality become written into bodies, often silently and long before a diagnosis appears. Most of us in this room know that early developmental health is a decisive factor across the lifespan, and yet outside of expert circles, it remains largely invisible. There are thousands of scientists around the world working on the developmental origins of health and disease. Still, many people who are pregnant, hope to become pregnant, or care for young children have never heard of this field, let alone had the chance to discuss its implications in language, images, and stories that feel close to their own lives. This is the gap we'll look at tonight. Not only the gap between early life and later illness, but the gap between research and public life, between what we know and how that knowledge circulates or fails to circulate through classrooms, clinics, kitchens, and parliaments. To do this, we are joined by 2 guests who have been working together for years to translate complex developmental science into shared cultural experience and, crucially, into community conversation and policy attention. Professor Dr. Deborah Sloboda is a leading figure in the field of the developmental origins of health and disease, She's professor and associate chair of research in the Department of Biochemistry and Biomedical Sciences at McMaster University and holds the Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Early Origins of Health and Disease. Her work shows early life conditions from nutrition and stress to broader social determinants. And that shape maternal, fetal, and placental development and how these early exposures echo across a lifetime of health and risk. She has published widely, mentored a generation of researchers, and helped build national and international networks that have reshaped how we think about prevention and equity in health. Alongside her laboratory and cohort work, Deborah has co-created the Art of Creation, an arts-based science communication initiative that turns the developmental health research into a public art exhibition and a platform for dialogue. Instead of keeping early life science in the realm of specialist papers and conference slides, the Art of Creation invites policymakers, educators, health and social workers, and community members to encounter this knowledge through artworks that touch emotion, imagination, and lived experience. The aim is simple and radical at once: to make the conditions for a healthy start to life a matter of shared public concern. Our second guest, Sarah Dickinson, is the person who ensures that this kind of work actually lands in classrooms, neighborhoods, communities. She leads education outreach and community at the Art Gallery of Hamilton and oversees programs that connect local artists with students across Canada. More than 5,000 young people each year through creative curriculum-linked learning. Building on more than 25 years of experience in arts and education and cultural leadership, Sarah has helped shape initiatives like the Art of Creation and Speakers of Truth, a program that amplifies Indigenous voices and opens space for conversation around truth and reconciliation. In Sarah's practice, the arts are not an add-on to education or well-being, but a medium for making sense together, for rehearsing other kinds of futures, for finding shared languages around health, family, land, and responsibility. Bringing Deborah and Sarah together here at Charité brings a set of guiding questions into view, questions we'll return to in our conversation and in the Q&A. How might early life research and public art together shift how we think about care, prevention, and community well-being? And what might a medical institution learn from a gallery and vice versa when it comes to making knowledge genuinely public? We'll begin with a presentation of our two guests about their work, the collaboration, and the genesis of the Art of Creation, and then we'll open to the discussion with you. This is usually the most juicy part of the evening, and I'm very much looking forward to that. You are all invited to ask all the questions. So thank you for being here tonight, for bringing your attention and your questions and your own stories into this ongoing experiment we call the healing arts. Deborah and Sarah, it's a joy to have you with us. Let's begin.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction. We are absolutely delighted to be here in Berlin, speaking about some of the things that we love to do separately and together. Yep, just gonna share. Okay, terrific. I thought I might start with a map of Canada so you can see where exactly we come from. Down at the bottom there is a star of where McMaster University, as well as the Art Gallery of Hamilton, sits in Hamilton. In that tiny little triangle down at the bottom is where the majority of Canadians live, in fact. There are only 33 million of us across this very large expanse of land, which actually also creates quite a number of barriers to health and health services. So that is just something to keep in mind. Okay, so during that very lovely and kind introduction, you heard about my interest as a reproductive biologist and in answering this question. I've spent my lifetime career in an attempt to answer this question. And many of us and those around us in the public, if we were to seek to answer this question, we would first begin to think where we come from in terms of our genetics or the epigenetics, and then those choices or behaviors that we control. So what we do to our lifetime, our physical activity, our diet, the things that we eternally have or we think we have control over. But there is a very important phase of life that we have less control over for ourselves that is largely lost in the picture of health trajectories and disease risks, and that is the early life environment. And we now know, and it's been well established for over 35 years now, that the early life environment interacts with those behaviors postnatally to influence disease risk, and that is this developmental or early origins of health and disease that was spoken about earlier. Okay, so what is early life? Most individuals will automatically think of the first few months of postnatal infant well-being or pregnancy, post-conception. And that's not surprising because the mother or the maternal or the pregnant environment develops the embryo or gestates and carries that fetus to term. However, the preconception environment is largely not discussed at all. And in fact, early life begins far earlier than when we think it does. So life begins before the beginning. And that environment also includes the paternal and the maternal lineages in equal measure to influence then our life course right from the beginning. So what kind of factors influence early life development? These are really easy. That's a really easy question to answer. In fact, what we eat, what types of food, how much, where we live, and the exposures around us all influence our early life environment. So that's a pretty easy question to answer. How these factors actually influence development, and even more complicated is why. And in fact, I'm not even sure we'll ever be able to answer the question why. Are questions that are much more complicated and ones that we have endeavored to try and answer in the laboratory. But I will present to you a case of how, for example, or even why. Here, if we consider this developing human in utero, communicating using this telephone to gather information about what is occurring in the external environment. So the developing human receives information via the mother in the form of hormones, nutrients, or oxygen, via the placenta, which is here depicted as the telephone, to predict what kind of environment it will be born into. And you might say, that's unusual. Why would it do that? And that is because this developing organism will then use this information to adapt its development to better its survival after birth and health into adulthood. So that's a theoretical basis for trying to think about why would all of these factors actually influence early life development? So the question is, does it actually happen? That's great theoretically, but do we have any evidence of this? And actually, it is happening all around us, outside of the clinical cases. And a very good example, among others, is one of this, the meadow vole, which is a tiny little vole. It's found in North America. It lives underground. Maybe it's found in Germany. I don't know. But it's a unique rodent because when the pregnant meadow vole is about to give birth, I didn't describe that very well. Whether the meadow vole gives birth in the fall or the spring determines whether or not the offspring are born with fur or not. So on the face value, that makes sense. So if the pups are born in fall, they're born with a thick coat of fur. If the pups are born in spring, they're born with a thin coat of fur, not naked necessarily, but a thin coat of fur. And if you don't think about it very hard, you think, well, like, of course, that makes complete sense. However, how do fetal meadow voles know that they're going to be born in the fall or in the spring? Number one is that's the first question. The second question is, why are they growing fur in utero? They certainly don't need fur in utero. So, perfect example of preparation and how the early life environment impacts postnatal phenotype. So, how is this happening? I'm going to ask the audience, if I may. How do you think? What is happening here? What is the embryonic meadow vole using to determine whether it's fall or spring? Anyone? Maybe just shout. No? No guess?
How long the days are.
Yes, how long the days are. That's exactly right. Why would that? How? Because the embryo cannot see the day length. So what is the signal?
Yeah, as far as I remember, there's this hormone MSH.
Oh, it's very technical. Yes. Melanocortin stimulate. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. So it actually is not the embryo that actually sees the daylight. Clearly, it is actually the maternal responses to the daylight that then alter circadian rhythmicity and changes in maternal melatonin levels that pass through the placenta and tell the embryo days are long or days are short, grow more or less fur. And that is a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about, is the modifications of factors that reach the embryo that modifies development to change adult phenotype in preparation for postnatal growth and development. So that's in utero, and in utero is very important. But as I said, the preconception environment is equally important. And not only is the preconception environment equally important, there is an aspect of the preconception environment that is largely forgotten, and that is the male contribution to healthy pregnancy. We never talk about that, other than half the DNA comes from the male. That's about it. However, many studies, both preclinical and clinical studies, show that the father is part of early life, not just informing the embryo, but impacting offspring health and well-being, even after controlling for maternal diet and maternal factors. And we know that the father's diet, stress, smoking, and age all influence the placenta and the placental development, because after all, the placenta is made of fetal tissue. So it's derived from both the maternal and paternal lineages. And not only that, but changes in paternal diet and well-being also influence many generations worth of health. So it's important. So the first 1,000 days is important. And not just that, but it is a period of heightened plasticity and sensitivity to the environmental stimuli, and has long-term transgenerational impacts on health trajectories. And this is really what we do in the laboratory. I've spent many years understanding, using animal models and clinical work to really understand this life course and how the life course actually impacts both disease risk, but also health trajectories. So how and why are very exciting to me. I spent a long time in the lab looking at them. However, I'm not here to benefit the health of either meadow voles or mice or rats or any other animal model that we use. We're here to benefit the health of humans, right? So what should we do about this? And that is really the question that has formed the basis for the partnership that we're going to talk about today. Because after all, it is not just the individuals that intend on becoming pregnant that need to be aware of this information. It is all of us. It is a community-based effort to ensure that our communities maintain their health trajectories, that our communities work together to actually reduce disease risk in our society. So does our community know about the early origins of health? No. That's the sad state of reality. So we need new approaches, new communication tools, more than graphs and colored pictures to communicate this message to the public. And that is where the partnership between McMaster University, there on the left, and the Art Gallery of Hamilton has emerged for arts-based science and health messaging to the public. And I'm going to invite Sarah, my partner, to come up and talk a little bit about what the Art Gallery does and where her interests are in messaging.
Good evening, everybody. I always kind of like to frame this as, science and art met and they got along really, really well. And this has been a 6-year relationship and discovery, and I have been absolutely honored to be a part of it. I work at the Art Gallery of Hamilton. I am in the Programs and Education Department, and I'm the lead of Community Engagement and Learning. And what that basically means is that a lot of the programming that I create, that I develop, is in not only partnership with organizations throughout the city, but it's a lot of going out into the community to facilitate these programs. And I thought I'd share just a couple of them, a few with you, before we dig into this incredible partnership that we have created with Dr. Sloboda and the Sloboda Lab. So I will start by talking a little bit about the learning. I should also preface that my background is an artist myself. I was a professional actor for about 12 years. Creative movement, I was a dancer as well. And it's too long to actually remember the actual date, but I was invited to be part of a program at the Royal Conservative Music in Toronto. And it was called the Learning Through the Arts program. And they also had an arts education training program as well. And so that's where I kind of got my start in how to use the arts as a tool for learning, for communication, for conversation. And my experience at the conservatory was quite incredible. I learned so much. I was a principal artist with the conservatory for quite a number of years. And then we left Toronto and we moved to Hamilton. And for a long time, I commuted back and forth, and I was until I was offered an opportunity to introduce the program into the city of Hamilton. They did not have anything similar in their schools, particularly where they use learning as a tool. And from there, I got to join the programming team at the Art Gallery of Hamilton. And this is where we really started to explore what the potential is for learning and arts. And one of the programs that I've been running for a very long time is AGH in Class. Now, we work with 4,000 students in equity-deserving schools each year. And they are 1 out of 4 young people that are at these schools are living below the poverty line. We have a large population of newcomers as well to the city. We also run programming throughout the city as well, but this one is I think, one of the most important ones that I feel has the most impact. We also get heavily funded by different organizations throughout the city as well. But I have a team of artist educators. I have a filmmaker, a rap poetry artist, filmmaker, visual artist, puppeteer, who am I missing? A theater artist. So we have an amazing group of artist educators that are professionals within our city that go into classrooms to use the art as a tool to engage students in learning into core subjects. So the core subject becomes the theme of the project. And the results have been quite amazing. We all have something to say, we just say it differently, is actually a quote from one of the students. All our teaching methods are based on differentiated instruction, and that's multiple ways to explore and express understanding. We support diverse learnings. There's probably I would say 6 to 7 young people in each classroom have learning support in some way, shape, or form. And it impacts the classroom. It really does change the culture of the classroom. It changes the classroom in a way that is positive within their small community. It impacts not only their classroom, but it trickles out into the school community as well. We always have higher attendance when the artist is visiting the classroom, when the project is being also developed, when the artist goes between visits, because they go to that classroom for 4 visits, but they are building, this term is scaffolding, but the project is built one visit to the next so that they are also working in between visits on whatever the subject is. They could be creating films, documentary films based on global warming and how it impacts their community. But attendance always goes up, and as does academic achievement. We cultivate self-esteem, creativity, resilience, and positive self-identity. One of the things I notice when I go visit the classroom, and I wish I was teaching more, but I'm not as much anymore, is that the teacher will say, there are 7 or 8 students in this classroom that are working below grade level. And she says, you won't be able to tell which one. They are all engaged, they are working together, they are collaborating, and they're sharing their ideas. And it's very exciting to see. And these are just a few quotes. She made me feel calm. I felt like it was a good way to learn. We shared ideas, delegated, and listened to each other. And these are quotes from ages 2 to grade 12, so 17. I like working together as a team. Everyone had a part. I would do it again. It was awesome. And this is actually a mural that they worked on with an artist, part of our program. And again, it was a group. These were in groups of 5 or 6 students that created this mural. One of the other projects that I learned a lot during my work with this group, it was humbling, and it was also it changed my focus a lot, and it's art is a tool for harm reduction. We worked with a group called Keeping Six, and I operate under belief that people with lived experience of drug addiction and homelessness, that the arts can be a tool for harm reduction, to bring people together. Not only are they sharing their stories, but they are building a sense of community as well. Now, they had funding to run workshops where the artists or the participants would come to a space. They were given food. They were also given a gift card. So there was incentive to attend the workshops. They were led by local artists, and it would be, kind of one afternoon a week. When the funding ran out, as it always sadly does, the participants continued to arrive each week. And I had been part of the development of the arts sessions, but it was at that moment, as the sessions continued, that we decided this would be a really lovely opportunity to have an exhibition. And this is our space, too, is an exhibition that we held at the Art Gallery of Hamilton in 2023. And all the art was made by people with lived experience of homelessness and drug addiction that were living in our community. And again, as I said, it was quite a humbling experience, and the sense of pride and excitement to see their work up in a space where they never felt welcome. That has always been a bit of a white tower, if I can use that term. It is not inclusive. It has not had a history of being inclusive and welcoming. And this was a really special event that I think changed a lot of people's perspective. But one of the goals of the whole exhibition was to challenge society to redefine our perception of community and who gets to be a part of it. We have a homelessness and a housing crisis in our city, in Hamilton, right across Canada, but particularly in Hamilton and right around where the gallery is. And it was a really powerful experience to be a part of, where we could open our doors and welcome those that we walk by on the regular basis and perhaps don't spend much time either thinking about, or perhaps we're avoiding and maybe walking on the other side of the street. But this gave an opportunity for us to understand that there's stories and experiences that need to be shared, not only for us as a society to have a deeper understanding of who and what happens to people when their sort of challenges in life have come up. But it was a really, I think, profound and lovely experience to be a part of. And then one of the last projects I want to share is one that it's in action right now in our city. Very close to where the art gallery is one of the oldest neighborhoods in Hamilton. And it's a very industrial, working class neighborhood. It has a very deep history of industry. And 7 years ago, a social housing site, a whole city block, was basically boarded up, and 91 families were relocated. The plan was to demolish the site and rebuild with mixed income housing. And the guarantee was everyone that was displaced would be invited back, that their level of the rent that they would be paying would be equal. And so everybody moved out of the community. Most people moved out of the community. And then it sat there for over 9 years, boarded up and fenced. And as I said, there's a housing crisis in our city, and there were tent cities all over the place. And there in this community sat this city block. I proposed to City Housing and the City of Hamilton to do an arts project. And I had proposed it quite early on in the boarding up of the residents. And it got put on hold. There was interest, but it got put on hold. And then in September, they decided to demolish, finally, after 7 years, demolish the housing and hopefully get things moving to start to rebuild. And I was invited to start the project. So over 1,000 students in that neighborhood are participating in an art making workshops with our artist team. They are creating art that will be mounted on the fencing that you just saw around the site. So it has to withstand the elements. But we're creating basically an outdoor gallery. Not only are we inviting the students in that neighborhood, but we are also inviting people of all ages. We want to celebrate the history, past, present, and future of the Jamesville neighborhood, but we also want to remind the young people that this is a neighborhood that is rich in history, and it's a community that needs to be celebrated. So they're in the process right now of making art. And then it will be mounted on the site. Each class will run the whole block, and each class will have a section. They will also have an artist statement. Their section will talk about what inspired their artworks. And then in the spring, we will have a week of installation. My plan is to shut the street down, and then everybody will be invited to participate in a celebration of the opening. And that brings me to another incredible partnership that I am so proud to be a part of. This is the Art of Creation with Dr. Sloboda. And she's going to come up and we will share the details. Thank you.
So I'll be quick because I'm mindful of the time. So the Art of Creation is this partnership between an individual who is very driven to take art and use art as a tool in community, and a reproductive biologist. And so we formed the Art of Creation project, which is a health advocacy program to increase the uptake of the science of early life, and to promote health before and during pregnancy, and more importantly, to bring community together to share the burden of growing a healthy next generation. And the Art of Creation goals were threefold: to use art to increase awareness, to use art to support and advocate, and finally, to establish cultural institutions as health advocacy and health messaging places. Cultural institutions are not used to their fullest extent, and I think we could use them more for really reaching society and giving directed messages. So the experimental design of the project is threefold. We had arts-based support groups, we had an immersive artist residency program, and then together pieces formed a public art exhibition. The art-based workshops with pregnant individuals, you'll see there, actually we're wearing masks, and that's because the project was funded in 2020. So we actually had to launch this after we were allowed to leave the house, and still in the midst of the pandemic. It was quite, it was a difficult time to be launching a community-based art project, but we did manage it. The arts-based workshops with individuals were made up of at least 8 times where we came together. So the first time we came together, we talked about the early origins of science, and we had a workshop on art making. This was followed by arts-based workshop support groups, which were led by both and equally a member of the research team, a scientist, as well as an art educator. And they shared the facilitation roles where art making became a tool that was used to unpack difficult and sensitive topics like miscarriage or health during pregnancy. Those 6 workshops, so they engaged in 6 workshops, then each time had a survey, and then we had follow-up surveys thereafter. This is some of the artwork that was produced at these focus group sessions. And together with all the other artwork that was donated to the project, we created a collage, which was then printed on a vinyl and is a piece in the art exhibition. We also photographed the pregnant participants when they came together. And Pauline here is a participant that wore the same outfit every single time she came, so that we have a map and a picture of what it looked like for these individuals to be pregnant. And then together we put them all on a very large 3-meter vinyl and displayed also that in the exhibition as a picture of what it looks like to be pregnant in the city of Hamilton. The second thing we did was an immersive art residency project where we brought in 7 local artists, where they spent time in the laboratory and with scientists, immersed looking at experiments. We did not give them publications to read. We did not give them a lecture. They simply asked questions and engaged in an immersive and experiential way. So they asked questions, they looked at data, they looked down the microscope, and they took lots of notes. And once they completed, it was over a month-long period. What did we ask them to do? Take the science that you've seen and create an art piece that conveys an important message that you heard. And the most important thing to come out of this, and if you can remember, is that we did not tell them the message. This is a message that they had to hear themselves and create the art piece based on that message. And so this is their art. So we had a watercolor artist that was very inspired by how cells come together. Obviously, none of the pictures do the art justice, but it'll give you a snapshot anyway of what they look like. We had an installation artist that was inspired by microscope slides, and these are plexiglass 1 meter tall slides of a pregnancy journey. We had the art educator that led the focus groups with the pregnant women actually make a piece that reflected her own experience of working with these pregnant individuals over a year's period of time. We had a dancer create a modern dance piece and an installation to some music. This is a very small clip of her piece. Right. We had a installation artist create a piece using Petri dishes and culture dishes, and just mindful of the time here. And we also had a painter really inspired by the political the political barriers that she felt she saw in health messaging and support that pregnant women see. And then I'll hand this over.
One of our artists was a mural artist who's quite prolific in the city of Hamilton. And originally, when he joined the project, he was just going to create a piece that would be part of the exhibition. And as he started to develop his piece, he came to us and he asked if he could do a mural. And he asked, we were taxed to basically find a spot in the city where he could do the mural. And we found a parking lot where there's a school, early years center, and a park. And we chose the start date to be the beginning of school so that there'd be lots of traffic that day, because his goal was to create the piece, but talk to the community to kind of share the message as to what this project was all about. This is one of the artists. He then went into the classroom. I won't play it. And the children were inspired to make their own mural. And then we worked with a rap poet named LT the Monk. Do we have time to show? Yeah. LT, I think, summarized the experience really well, and we'd love to share it with you. One more.
The supervised child. Okay, let's take JC. Take him out of the poison ivy, the project, the 1,000 leagues under the sea of progress. Headed to an Ivy League school project from the poison of progressive minds and prospects. Forget 1,000. He's a Fortune 500 CEO out, all stemming from something very simple: our environment, from mud, maybe surroundings. It's like with a big and something side move around the globe. Under the microscope, dissect everything that affects school home, the high-fat diet, clean water, fast food, everything about 50 mountains, this whole group. One meeting was well fed, one was malnourished, one was well read, one was maladjusted, one was given half the food of the other. Both groups delivered, becoming some young mothers. And the offspring of both were given the same shit. Both got the carbs, all the food and bed. But the thing about the genes, offspring of the underfed, knew was feed and this food was scarce stuff. When they got it, they held no regret. So the fact, when it will come again, ain't the same amount as they kind of cost, but that environment that obesity wasn't bringing that. Imagine that in June, parents have a baby born with a germ cells, they're cutting an egg or sperm cell. There's a baby in the future, that's 3 generations from one pregnancy. So the children is ranked as healthy, comes to the environment that they grow in. Same environment that the parents smoking it, information soaking it. And I'm really hoping that experiments unfolded, but really by focusing on the fact that today's decisions affect tomorrow's vision. The key is what's going to be surrounding us empty. It's poverty that wants to try to get it. Big money, man, wants to try to help it out. Jay-Z success, you can forget about, because 99% of problematic is stressing out, but if we aware of what we are praising them in, healthy house, healthy move to stay in it, and maybe one day, because those will be amazing when the door was closed. But you open it up, the next Bill Gates to come in. That's 5.
Yeah, very powerful. So in the last 1 minute or so, I'll just tell you just a little bit about the exhibition. So we took all of these pieces, including the pregnant participant photo, and we had an exhibition. And first we invited all the pregnant participants to join us, which was quite amazing. We had 20 strollers in front of a sign that said "The Art of Creation" in front of it, which was quite amazing. The participants came and saw themselves in the space and in the project and how they fit together. And they had a real sense of community. And I'll just say that we did have a participant that actually lost her baby in the midst of the project. And yet she still came to the exhibition. So she felt empowered enough to be able to do that, even though she and her family had suffered such a great loss. So that was really amazing to see. So I'm just going to end it with to say that we had the exhibition began at an art gallery, but we did take it to 5 other sites throughout our community because it was really important to us to make sure that we went where people were. And that was community centers, recreation centers, and libraries. So we successfully launched the exhibition in all of these places. We'll be taking it to different universities, Western University in Canada. We're also taking it to the University of Southampton, where it's going to participate in the British Science Festival next year. We're hoping desperately that we can bring it to Charité here and engage in a study here with Dr. Torsten Braun. And then we will end it, and hopefully that won't be the final resting place, but we will be ending it at the McMaster Museum of Art in the fall of 2027. So that's where we'll end. We hope that you have been inspired to go from evidence to engagement, because that's the most important thing, I think, in taking our data and our science to the community to increase connection, conversation, and also inspire the community. And that's where we'll end it. Thank you very much.
Actually, I keep the other one.
You
share that one.
Yeah, we'll share.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So for those of you that are here for the first time, I start by breaking the ice a little bit, ask a few questions, then it's really up to you guys to keep this conversation going. There's a lot of input. Thank you. A fantastic project, and congratulations for keeping it up and keeping it running for so long. The last thing that you said was very powerful, from evidence to engagement. Now, one of the first questions that I was thinking about is when you translate, so this is under the wider topic of translation. When you translate rather complex biological or developmental biology or medicine with artistic formats, just like you did, like what do you gain that maybe classical science communication cannot do?
Not everybody understands a graph. Number one, I can give individuals lots of data in the form of numbers, in the form of pie charts, in the form of graphs and lines, but you actually have to have some grounded understanding of what those numbers mean. What is 10 out of 1,000? I'm not sure what that means. Like, you have to have some grounded foundation to understand what 10 out of 1,000 actually means. Is that a very high risk or is it a very low risk? Whereas if we, and as we did, use the art, it was understandable. It was accessible to individuals that may not understand what 10 out of 1,000 is in terms of disease risk. So that was the impetus for using the art, so that it was accessible and also evoked emotion. So one of the artists, Ravinder, who did the microscope slides, was emotive. Her emotions drove her science, because she went back to her own pregnancy and described it and lived it and created the art piece in that fashion. So it was emotive to her. Do you want? I think you got it.
And as a follow-up, you mentioned health advocacy a couple of times. This is also a form of health advocacy. And there are two things that I was very intrigued by. This is one, I forgot fully the name, I think it was called the immersive residency, of artists working or spending time for months in the lab and then sharing their work. And the other one was actually the shared facilitators of the workshops, artists and scientists. So this is all about collaboration, what we do here. This is also an experiment. I would be really curious about your hands-on experiences or learnings from this. Artists engaging in a, let's say, more scientific or medical environment, and this kind of co-learning, co-teaching situation.
So I'll speak from the science perspective, and then Sarah can speak from the art perspective. So I have been engaging in community-based focus groups for a long time, having nothing to do with art. And focus groups typically, when you want to engage individuals in, uncovering certain questions, and you have prompts. But invariably in those discussions, there's a lot of silence, right? There's a lot of, I don't want to be the first, or I'm not sure how to express this sentiment, or I don't want to talk about something that makes me sad or makes me anxious. And the art facilitated that. So from my perspective, from somebody who leads focus groups and engages in trying to engage individuals in conversation, that was remarkable how much easier it was when alongside of me, the researcher, you also had an artist saying, this is blue. Or it's not that simple. Of course, I know that. that was a very simplistic way of putting it. And Sarah can speak to that. But to me, it opened my eyes to understanding what was unsaid in all of the conversations I previously had. There was a lot unsaid, and we uncovered that using the art. And maybe Sarah.
When it came to the artist's residency, I honestly think one of the most successful moments was when we brought Deb's team, the lab team, to the gallery to meet the artists. And we all gathered at the table, and you brought everybody a lab coat, and we painted lab coats. But it set a tone right from the start. It built relationships. It made people feel comfortable. Everybody felt welcome. And they're two very different groups coming together. But I think that was a really important moment because we built some relationships before the artists went into the lab. And now I have to say, your lab is amazing. You have created a really positive environment. They're lovely and open and welcoming, but they really coming together before that really built relationships. And I honestly think this whole process is all about the relationship building with the educator in the focus groups, with the pregnant women, partnering with a researcher as well. And Jordan was our kind of go-to. She was there for almost each one. The relationships were built between them, and then of course with the group as well. It just became more and more comfortable to share ideas, ask questions.
Which brings me to another follow-up question, and then you guys can get ready slowly. No, I have a few more. And this is kind of a recurring question that we have, but I mean, community was mentioned a lot, or relationship building, no? Like, I think both of you, it's probably the one term that you mentioned most was community in your presentations. So that says a lot. So I'm wondering, what can medical institutions or scientific institutions learn from cultural institutions, or maybe vice versa, in how to engage with communities?
You want to start?
Sure. I think that under a traditional sense, this is obviously just my opinion, that clinical institutions are closed. They're closed to the public. When you talk about who is in the clinical institution, you just say patients. Patients are there, which is true. It's very important to treat patients and treat the disease and treat the ailment and make sure people are healthy. But individuals are more than patients. They're people, and they're people that live in a community, and they come with lived experience. They come with different types of embodied knowledge. And we do this in educational institutions as well. Everybody comes in and they're treated the same all the time. We give them all the same information in the same manner. And it doesn't work. And then we're surprised that it doesn't work. So I think what cultural institutions can do, and we can learn from, and I say we because I work in a clinical and educational institution, is that these cultural institutions embrace the diversity. They want the diversity, they generate diversity rather than trying to put everyone into exactly the same box. Because of course, treating patients is easier when they're in the same box. I understand that. That's, of course, that's needed. But there must be some flexibility, I think, around the edges.
I would only add that we are touching on humanity. We're touching on stories. We're touching on remembering that everybody comes into a building, into any environment with a history. And having a little bit of empathy and understanding, I think is really important to create anything at all. And so we as a cultural organization as well have art in a learning process as well. As an art gallery, we are working at being more accessible. We are opening our doors to welcome everybody in, because I think for a long time, like education organizations are places of higher learning, it's not always accessible. And so I think that's really important.
Well, first, thank you very much for this exciting presentation. It's really a fascinating model, I think, to use artistic activity for improving individual and community health. Now, there's two obvious questions. First of all, who do you think it is suitable for? In other words, how did you select, for example, the pregnant women? And if so, how are they characterized? And the second obvious question is, you indicated during your talk that you would do some follow-up, some evaluation, like 2 years follow-up, I think. Have you done it yet, or are you still in the middle of it? Because that would, of course, be fascinating to see what kind of health effects you want to see, ideally compared to some control group without any such project.
Okay, I always have to battle this question. It's the second time since I've been in Germany that I'm talking about a control group. We didn't have a control group. We did not have a control group. This was not designed like an RCT or an intervention. What we wanted to know was what would happen if we got women in a room, talked about health during pregnancy, and engaged in art. And I can only say anecdotally, compared to focus groups without art, the conversation was free flowing. We did in the survey specifically ask them, did art make you feel more comfortable? So we did have those questions embedded in it. 91% of the women said yes. Engaging in art activities made me more comfortable, made me get rid of the fear of communicating. It made me comfortable to be around other individuals because they watched each other also, right? They would share their art and comment, actually. Oh, maybe you should use blue. I don't know why I'm talking about blue all the time. Maybe she's blue in that picture, right? So we do have survey work that we're following up on. We have a little bit of data suggesting that as they engaged in these activities and the follow-up, at least up until 6 months after the last focus group, they were still thinking about the early origins. They at least commented on in the survey that they were still thinking about it in their day-to-day life, that it hasn't escaped them. The follow-up also told us that they were still in touch with each other, which honestly, to me, is the biggest outcome. Because it was 47 women in total that had never met each other. And I'll tell you about the recruitment in a minute. They had never met each other, and all of a sudden they were meeting each other. They created Facebook groups. They were supporting each other. So that to me was an amazing outcome. The way in which we recruited them was actually just by word of mouth. They were not patients in a clinic. They were off of Facebook, off of Instagram. The only criteria was that they had to have been living in Hamilton or the greater surrounding area. They had to be 20 weeks gestation or less. And that's it. That was the only criteria. And they came together. We gave them a bag of art supplies, and then that's it. Then we just had this art educator and a researcher work with them together the whole time. And we still have lots of data. We're analyzing the qualitative data right now. All the conversations were audio recorded, transcribed, and now being analyzed, along with all the quantitative data. That's the last bit of the analysis that we're doing.
And regarding selection, do you have the impression that these are average persons?
Yeah.
Better educated,
yeah. No, they span the whole spectrum. As the women were being recruited, it was a little bit tricky, I have to say. Like it was 2021 and we were still going through waves of the pandemic. So as we were recruiting women, we were forming focus groups and we had their demographic data, where they were living, their age, first pregnancy, blah, blah, blah. And as we saw a gap in, let's say, income level or education level, then we set out to purposefully oversample in some areas. So we had a very wide distribution of income levels, newcomers, education. Yeah.
Thank you for your explanations and for your pictures. It was really touching for me as a father of three. And I was really surprised how you could manage to make art and science as well accessible for everyone. In Germany, it's like, the artist, it's quite above you, and the doctor is quite above you. And it is not really a connection to those fields for the people. My question is, even when you told us in this moment that you are still gathering data, are there following projects? Are there projects to communicate science and well-being and health through art in the future?
So other than the one we're going to do at the Charité, as soon as we get funding, one of the things that I would like, I'm going to do, whether I get funding or not, I will just have to sell some cakes or something, is a project on partners and fathers. Because what emerged out of a lot of the conversations that we heard in the many conversations that we had with these pregnant women was, every so often I would hear partner, husband, and then there was a small conversation around it. And so when we heard it, we started to ask more questions, to prompt more questions. So we started to ask, well, are you being supported the way you want to be supported? There seemed to be a gap in what the father or the husband thought they were doing and what the pregnant person actually needed and wanted and got. So one of the things we did following it was we had a tiny little pilot study right in the middle of all of this. And we did semi-structured interviews with men and / fathers. The only criteria was that they had to be with somebody who was pregnant. That was the only criteria. In fact, it didn't have to be fathers. It just had to be anybody who had a partner who was pregnant or becoming pregnant. We recruited 21 individuals, 19 of them identified as men. One of them was in a same-sex relationship, a lesbian relationship. And then we just asked them questions about, we asked them the same questions we did to the pregnant women. What makes a healthy pregnancy? What is your role in healthy pregnancy? What did you do? Did you change your behavior? Did you not change your behavior? What do you think is supportive? What is not supportive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm very sad to say that the 19 that identified as men, the data are disheartening, I have to say. Many of them did not know or did not actively engage in anything. I have to say the only individual that actively prepared for the pregnancy was the lesbian couple. So I wrote a big grant, and I'm hoping to get it funded to actually use some of the methods that we described here to start to talk about preconception health for men. Mainly as a way of distributing the worry that we heard from the women about always having to be the person who's not drinking and what should I eat and what should I do and how much should I sleep and should I sleep on my side or my back or right? So there's a lot of worry. And we saw the worry and we keep seeing the worry. It doesn't matter how gently you talk about this, there is always worry. So how can we redistribute the worry. We're not going to get rid of the worry. The worry will always be there because people are worried about their babies. That's, of course, that's very natural. But how can we redistribute the amount of worry that is placed upon the pregnant individual? And can we give some of it actually to the person who contributes the other half of the genetics and the epigenetics and the growth of the placenta and the embryo?
It's fantastic, and led myself to the idea that there should be a new narrative of fatherhood in a society. When we look about the last 200 years, always men were absent in families, and it is contributed through contes faits. I don't know the English expression. Märchen? Fairy tales. Fairy tales too. Yeah, fairy tales too. That men are absent, and so there need to be another story.
Yes.
And that is quite good vehicle to contribute the story through art, I think. Yeah.
So Sarah doesn't know this, but we're going to make some art about fathers. Yeah, at least 2 pieces anyway.
It's not really a question. It's just a comment. Like, I think it's so wonderful to see, or like to see a presentation about the 2 different kind of thinking, let's say. So we have the medicine where everything needs to be proved and we need data and we need to understand, and like the feeling of being right is not enough, let's say. And then we have the art part, which for me is like you create art by trying, by just experiment, by feeling, and then to create something that you have a nice response to. So it was just a comment to see what we can create actually with those both different kind of thinking. And then there's maybe a question: do you think if you would have not like, I mean, none of us is born as an artist or born as a medicine. So you made some decisions and then you became what you are. So I'm just curious to understand if you think, I don't know how, but your way would be something different and you would be the artist and you would be the medicine. Like, do you think your brain or yourself is capable of thinking the other way? You know what I mean? Like getting more trust while experimental and being very strict to data and stuff. Yeah.
Thanks for the comment and the question. So I would argue that art and science are exactly the same. They're not at all different. But scientists have forgotten about scientific observation because science came from observing and seeing something and then seeing it again, and then again, and then again, and then going, oh, I guess that happens, right? That's actually science. And it just so happens that now we apply power calculations, because now when I see it, I have to see it 1,000 times in order for it to be statistically significant, but I'm still seeing it. I'm still seeing it. So in the lab, I constantly am talking to the students, particularly because we do a lot of histology and we look at blood vessel development in the placenta. And I say, what did you see? Oh, I done it, and it didn't work out and it's not significant. I did the measure. And I'm like, who cares? What did you see? Well, yeah, I saw a lot of blah, 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 and it looked weird. And I was like, okay, tell me about the weird. What was weird? Let's talk about it, because we've forgotten entirely about scientific observation, because that's a thing. That is actually the basis of science. And then we've added all the rules, of course, because you don't want to just walk around observing things and then write a paper to Nature. It's not going to work. But that's the same as the artist. And I will also argue, you said it yourself, I experiment. You use the word experiment, right? That is what you do. It is trial and error. And no scientist in this room will tell me that they did one experiment and it worked. I won't believe you. You're lying, right? Because you have to repeat that. Not only do you have to repeat things, you have to repeat them because they don't work. And the same as painting, I'm imagining. that you paint and then you hate it, do you not? And then you walk away and maybe paint over top of it. And then it emerges, right? So I would argue that they're exactly the same. But we're, I don't know, maybe just not listening to each other anymore. Yeah. Because we're not sitting in rooms like this anymore, maybe. I don't know, at least not in North America.
I think that's kind of sums it up, because it's just kind of coming from a place of it's like your heart. You're connecting your emotions. You're connecting experiences. I mean, that's when I think of theater, I think of art as it's experiential, right? You're coming of a place of joy or anger or frustration, and as the scientist, experiments that don't work, all of those things, we don't think about it as often as we should. The similarities, let's say.
Yeah, thank you also from my side for this fantastic presentation. Although I heard it on Monday, I'm fascinated again and again by the stories. And but I'm still thinking about the connection between the early idea, fetal programming, and the baby is still being inside, preparing for the world outside. So, but what is exactly then the connection or the association between this necessity to prepare and the actual creative engagement of the mother during pregnancy? I think this connection, what exactly brings the workshops, the creativity, the communication, they are coming in for this better preparation of the child. So I think this connection, we have to think about this, because especially we are planning projects and and we want to convince someone to give money for this. So I think we still have to shape this a bit.
If I may ask you a question,
Yeah.
Do you mean, just so I can, if I'm hearing the question right, do you mean what is the biological output? Like, are you asking me, is there an actual impact of engaging in artwork and having complex conversations using artwork impacting the growth and development of the embryo biologically?
A biological
Sure.
impact? Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this. Decrease in stress hormones and increase in oxytocin. Okay. Like, there are biological bases for sure, right? I think that more importantly, it is the cumulative effect of feeling safe, supported, and empowered that is benefiting the pregnancy, not the actual, like, when I am doing art, I feel relaxed. And yes, maybe you have lower cortisol levels, right? But I think it's the cumulative act of doing it that you feel supported, that you feel that you can ask questions, that you are not the only person that is fearful of what's happening in pregnancy. Those types of things, I think, are what will eventually benefit that individual, not just during pregnancy, and obviously the embryo and the fetus will benefit, but also during lactation, because if you have a community, right, then if you have difficulty breastfeeding, if you will have support, more support around you, because a lot of the individuals, a number of the individuals, in fact, that were in the focus groups didn't have any support. They knew nobody actually in Hamilton, which I thought was terrifying. So having that over, I think it's a much more subtle effect. Of course, we would propose to measure it in a grant application. Would I be surprised if their cortisol levels were lower? No, that is what I would hypothesize. But I think sometimes, again, coming back to the scientific observation, we think if it's in such a reductionist way, like we're going to do this, we're going to measure that, and there's the effect. Amazing. Let's write a Nature paper about it. But actually, the outcome is that subtle accumulative impact. And actually, what I would really love is to write a paper about changing societal perception of pregnancy. right? And incorporating, female reproductive autonomy into it, and how fathers can incorporate, and how together we're doing this together. So that to me is a better paper. Like, sure, I'll take the cortisol, right? But yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not so comfortable speaking through with the microphone, but I do it. Thank you so much. Very inspiring. My background is somatic experiencing, like transgenerational trauma, and I'm a film producer, so that's why I love to come here. And was just crossing my mind to give you also like maybe an idea is that we when you are pregnant or when you're about to give birth, you're also dealing with so many difficulties, like who am I as a woman? Like what does motherhood mean? What does it mean to be responsible for a human being? Did I receive love? Where am I in my society? La 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 la. All of these things, and I think through art. And depending on which questions are throwing in, and if you work with, like, I don't know, paper cuts of like your ancestors and the other generation. Last time I was talking about, like, I'm going to make a film, a documentary about like transgenerational trauma with us being in Germany with all our wars and stuff. So I believe sitting with a therapist is quite confrontative, and people don't dare to go there. I mean, people are not very comfortable going there, but I believe playing and be a little bit more like playful of like having colors or having paper cuts, then you might throw a topic in like, oh, this is so thinking of like, okay, who's my grandfather? Where does he come from? Like, who are my grandmother? Was she in war? Was she in, like what's my history? And then you're facing it, and then you're also like, okay, this is me. My family has this background, so I might end it up like this because this already happened like 2 or 3 generations, and we all know that transgenerational trauma like takes like up to 4 generations. So yes, yeah, I don't. So
that's a wonderful point.
So what came to me is like using these important question and using art as a tool of like, I don't know, paper cutting or even looking at to art, but to make it a bit more playful to address the important topics, because you don't, I mean, yes, you learn and sit with your partner how to breathe and stuff, but the most important thing you don't learn. And then you end up in hospital where they're also a little crazy and tell you how to do things and that you do things wrong, la la la. I'm not a mother, but I've been sitting there and helping. So yeah.
So just on that topic, we did because we engaged in these art-based focus groups, we worked a lot with our municipal public health services. And we have a program, a prenatal nutrition program in Hamilton. It's called Welcome Baby. And that's where we actually recruited a lot of pregnant, and the nurses and the dietitians that sat in on those classes saw these incredible changes and sharing, right? Sarah led this group, but on the heels of that, they actually asked us, we need to incorporate this into all of our classes. In fact, can you do one with a group of individuals that are very vulnerable that we work with? They usually are teenage pregnancy or single mothers or sometimes homeless. And we did this, and I'm going to hand it over to you to tell about the young woman who did the collage, just talking about motherhood. Okay.
So this particular workshop, there was a very young woman, I would say 16 or 17, sitting there, and she was working, and we just kind of are coming around and sitting and chatting and, talking about what inspires you. And she had been putting a lot of it was a collage. There was a lot of tropical, there was a sun and there was this, and she I asked her what was inspiring her in some of these choices, and we talked about adventure. And then it kind of flowed out that she was very afraid of not having adventure anymore because she was a young mother and I think didn't see what life could be like beyond having a baby and not necessarily having a career or anything yet. And she was very quiet and clearly kind of overwhelmed by it all. Now, it was a conversation I had, but because the public health nurses were there as well and were observing, we hope that this is something that they will be able to continue to have those conversations. We would also, after everyone was finished, we'd have kind of a little gallery walk where everyone would put their works on the table. And it was amazing, the conversations that just started to flow as they talked about what the works or the pieces were that they had created with very little prompting actually from us, because they'd spent this hour sitting and chatting and creating, and they've created now this comfort with each other. And I know that the public health nurses that were there that day, and they mentioned it to Deb afterwards, were blown away by the conversation that happened after. And it was really lovely to see. And that we hope will continue as well.
I'll just say, so if we would have just sat around, right, and asked, what do you think about your health? This young woman would have never said, I'm really worried about my life ending after I have this baby. That she wouldn't have said that, right? So because we did the collage, right, and that's what she was feeling, that's what was expressed. So, yeah.
Very beautiful example. I would.
Question, you were also cancer when you, and the art is not only making collage, art is also dancing and embodiment, and you could feel and sense in a new way when you are approaching through embodiment programs. Any ideas?
I'll just repeat this for the online audience. You might not have heard it. The question very simply was your background also as a dancer and actress, and how far did any embodiment practices play into the game?
It's something I want to do more of, because we had a group of public health practitioners do a workshop with us when the exhibition was in the gallery, and I had everybody get up, and I love word walls. So we're going to look at a piece and we're all going to kind of pick out words, and we're going to, but I love to play with them next. And I was actually hoping we'd have time today. We didn't, but I did have a little creative movement idea in the back of my head for today, but it's just now, let's create a picture. So let's look at the words and create a picture with our body. And then I'm going to play a piece of music, and everybody's just going to move around the room. And when I pause the music, I want you to turn that word into a statue. And then we add, and we just kind of develop. And there's this group of scientists. We were in Vancouver doing a conference. This group of scientists were moving around the room to music, but it was very gentle, and it was really lovely to see. But I love incorporating movement wherever I can. It's just another way to express whatever information is that you are being presented. So yes, I am very keen on doing that.
Beautiful. Next time we should incorporate it, actually.
I know.
And now we're running out of time. But beautiful examples, but maybe staying with the examples. Can you maybe share one last moment in the art of creation where you felt like an artistic work or engagement, an artistic engagement, like fundamentally changed someone's understanding of early development?
You got one? Okay.
Okay. So LT, the rap, young, right? He's young. He was what, 25 when he came into the laboratory. He did all the same things that all the other artists did, watched, listened, did stuff, was obviously very inspired. And the last time he was in the lab, before he created his art piece, in fact, said to me, I said, oh, I'm really sorry. I won't get to see you for a little while. And, he said, oh, I'm really going to miss this. I really love it. But I went, what? He said, I have to change my entire life. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I am completely ruining my sperm. So he got it, right? Like this 25, 26-year-old young man, a rap artist. He's like hanging around downtown Hamilton, writing rap music and doing all sorts of debauchery. I don't know what he was doing, but he got it, right? He totally got it. So he was like, I got to change my life.
One of the, that is a good one. One of the moments that come to mind is Jill's piece. So the political picture, if you remember the work. And we were in a community center downtown, and there was a high school next door. So a group of high school students had come over. LT was actually going to be the artist working with them. I was walking them through our kind of mini exhibition because we brought prints of some of the works to the space. And there were 4 or 5 16, 17-year-old women and a couple of guys. And the conversation, like I basically just said to them, you know, what do you think is happening here? What do you see? And the conversation that was sparked, you know, those moments you get goosebumps on your hand or in your arms, like it was just one had, oh, I think I see this. And then somebody else jumped in and they had this, like I literally didn't, besides asking, what do you see? I stepped back and this fantastic conversation went on where you just have that moment going, yes, that's what it's all about. Then they went into a workshop space and they wrote raps based on what they just observed. Like all the stars came together. And last thing is when the artists started sending us their responses, their works, they emailed us like just kind of little images of the works, or of course, LT sent his piece. And every time one came, I looked at it. They might write a little sentence because they wrote a whole artist statement as well. And I remember going, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. And then the next one would come in and you're like it was just, a couple of them made me cry because they were so, like it just kept coming in. This one's better than this one. The experience of seeing what they created was so exciting. From Deb and I sitting having coffee one day going, we really should take art and science and create, you know, and we started riffing on what we can do. That moment to me was so special, really special.
Can I just add one more of my own personal moment? Yeah. So my personal growth in all of this was that we don't give people enough credit. I brought 7 people into my lab, only one of which actually did any science at all in undergraduate. So everyone else finished science in year 10 of high school. And they got it, right? I didn't have to explain anything complicated to them. They just asked questions, they saw, they talked to each other, they talked to the students, they talked to each other some more, and that's what they created. So that rap, like that describes my animal work. And I did not lecture him and describe what epigenetics was to him. He understood it. So we don't give people enough credit. We think that we have to always speak, you know, in simple terms and actually, but they got it. They completely understood something that I've been trying to teach undergraduate students for years, right? And they understood it. So that was eye-opening for me.
It's a nice closing line. And I'm trying to connect now what you've been talking about to the last talk we had here and an upcoming talk. And there's a lot of nice connections. First of all, I'm really thankful that you brought up the importance of scientific observation, where it actually comes from, and a lot of trial and error, and just doing it again and again and again. And this is what we talked about last time, where there was a philosopher and a historian of science, Hans-Jörg Reinberger, who focused on science and arts as both what he called experimental systems, because they have the same basis, no? That observation. Our next talk that we will have is with actually a medical professional and an artist who kind of look at the scientific and the artistic observation, because another thing they have in common, a good artist properly looks at things. He carefully looks, and a good scientist and a good medical professional also carefully looks at the patient, not only at the sheet in front of the data, but how is she doing? What's her posture, etc. So this is a connection that we were looking at the next time. So there's a beautiful in-between space we have here. So thank you so much for being here. It was very inspiring, very eye-opening. I wish you all the best with a fun day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
And I hope to see you again in the beginning of next year for the next session of the Healing Arts Encounters in Arts and Medicine. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.